Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you, who knows what recording this is. I wanted to address the Grotmas detachments now that we've seen 1 week of them to kind of get a feel on a couple of things. I've taken this video in both directions. One where it's just like, let's just try what I would do to fix them and let's just see what went wrong, but also not wrong at the same time because technically nothing's wrong with them. Okay, there are things wrong with them. But that's not necessarily what the problem is. We all saw Necron's Star Shatter Arsenal and went, how do you write those rules, right? And admittedly, even as somebody who likes Necron's secondary army, um, I'm like, what the flip? How do you do this for Necron's data sheets, and especially after all the other things that you just released? And over time, I realized the thing that I am more upset about isn't necessarily that Necron's got this. Um, because looking at it more and more, I think I do fall into the category of people that don't believe that it's just OP bananas busted. Like, it isn't some of the most egregious things. It does invalidate a lot of the other codex things, like I am still annoyed that I waited a year for Obeison's Phalanx to be playable by giving me the Silent King in that detachment. And then this comes out and it's like, okay, why would I ever play Obeison's Phalanx? Like that what does annoy me about this? But then I realized my problem isn't this. This is a very well written detachment. This is now some of it, yeah. Dread Majesty, I'm surprised they gave that as an aura. Um, and a few others where I'm just like, huh, you didn't restrict that as hard as you did other places, like reactive reposition. I have on my thumbnail of my first coverage a Transcendent Catan. So what that leaves possibilities to, because it says Necron's unit, is that I can Transcendent Catan, teleport 9 inches away to get an angle on somebody that's on an objective, +1 to hit, which doesn't come in handy because they hit in twos anyway, but um, say they had stealth, right? Or something that was -1 to hit. -1 to hit, pop a CP for +1 to hit, +1 to wound on the detachment, excuse me. +1 to wound with Merciless Reclamation, and then when they try to shoot me, I can, after one unit shoots me, if they don't get me down, which they probably won't because I'm a Catan with a T11, 4-up invuln, half damage, feel no pain, I reactive reposition somewhere else. And I'm not mad that that's possible, right? Like, yeah, that's stronger than other armies, but I realize I'm not upset that the Necron detachment lets me have fun. In fact, the Necron's Codex has been one of the better ones because several things from it have been strong. Awakened Dynasty is seeing play. Hypercrypt Legion was probably the most dominant out of all of them this over the course of time this edition. Canoptic Court saw a lot of heydays, and then you just wonder what went wrong with Annihilation Legion, and Obeison's Phalanx took forever to be viable, and now not it's nowhere near as good with the units that you would put in. Like for example, Obeison's Phalanx, the current list is two DDAs, the Silent King, and a couple of Triarch Stalkers. But I'm doing that because, yeah, the Triarch Stalkers have Triarch and the Silent King has Triarch, but now I just give Ignore Maj or rerolls Silent King on a target that I had +1 to wound, maybe strip the cover with the Triarch Stalkers first, and then fire away with my DDAs. But as you notice, yeah, 2 out of 3 of those units are Triarch, but all 3 are vehicles. So I am glad that we have a detachment. Um, and I'll be honest, I think the thing that Jack said from Art of War on the stream that resonated with me the most is that this is a lore accurate War in Heaven Necron's detachment. And that's what I do love the most. Somebody looked at it, said, what do Necrons like? What do Necrons do? And wrote a detachment. So it's not necessarily that the Necrons one is so overtuned. Like, don't get me wrong. I am surprised that they gave assault to vehicle and mounted units after we saw how powerful it is with Bringers of the Flame, and Renegade Raiders is that's their best detachment. So it's like surprised that they did that. But if you take out assault here and maybe jack this up to 40 points, I don't care about this detachment really. Not to the same like, whatever. Like I don't think that is such a clear discrepancy to the rest of the detachments and armies after that point. So then going forward, I think the problem isn't that, it's that nobody else, it feels like nobody else that put these together, for the vast majority of them, realized what army they were writing for. And that's what I take issue with after finally calming down and being, I'll be honest, I was pissed as a Tyrannid. Okay, maybe not pissed. I didn't care because like they're that much because like I said, I Necron's is one of my secondaries. But Tyrannids, I'm playing with fucking Tyrannid warriors over here compared to any Necron's vehicle and mounted units just gets assault. Okay, cool. Um, and that's where I can sympathize a little bit more with the Death Guard and their fly-blown host. It does have, in my opinion, the right design direction because you have, oh, well, what's the thing with Death Guard? Well, they have contagion range. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So what happens when somebody isn't in their contagion range? Oh, Death Guard dies. Death Guard doesn't have an ability really. Okay, so how do we let them get to somebody to give them their contagion range? Well, we made them sticky objectives and infect that. Yeah, but they have to hold it at one point, right? Yeah, but like if you get there, it's fine. Flyblown Host does take the option or the route of if you are faster and can't be hit till you get to your designation, then you can turn on your contagion. And I can appreciate that because if a bunch of shit scout at 5, you have the option to still bring stuff like Mortarion and the Demon Prince, um, the Walking Demon Prince. That Mortarion can expand the contagion range and your Demon Prince. I know everybody keeps talking about how they don't run him because he's not that great, but he's not that great currently for what he does in the way that Death Guard currently plays. But if turn 1, everything on the board has a 6-inch contagion range, and all your units are 5 inches out from the deployment zone, you had some Nurglings to block out that scout from getting blocked, you're already covering most of the board, and they might not have an angle on you to shoot to actually get into combat first turn. Like, yeah, if they start shooting, you have stealth. And if you go first, well, guess what? You just get to push out further. So I understand the direction, but then it's the fact of how restrictive everything else is that shows a little bit more of a, well, it seems not everybody had the same revision process. Because with Flyblown Host, I genuinely think Death Guard players would be happier if you took out that they can't be embarked within a transport. If you gave infantry the ability to have Scouts 5 just straight up, and you let people put their rhinos on the ground and Scout 5, Death Guard would be so much happier with this, from what I understand. I know they I know they're not quite happy to change, but there's that too, right? And then with Mephitic Invigoration, why specifically a Mephitic Blight Hauler? Like, that's not beating the allegations of this is to move product off the shelf that doesn't get moved. But at the same time, over here, it's clearly not written from that perspective, right? Because these are units that people are bringing anyway. So this just like, hey, bring more of those. Nobody took a chance on Necrons and was like, yeah, we can't fix Annihilation Legion. Um, everything's already Cryptek or Canoptic, so we did that. How about we make a detachment for their flyers? And you're just like, what? So like nobody did that. They realized what Necron players will want, what they're buying, and made something around it. Death Guard, you still have an entire codex coming, so we don't know what's in the codex per se. But if this was from a perspective outside of, hey, buy Mephitic Blight Haulers, this would say Death Guard vehicle. And honestly, that's the other thing I take issue with this. Why does Mephitic Invigoration have a condition to get transhuman when a vehicle or mounted, as long as it isn't Titanic, just gets that? I don't know if you know this, but vehicles are traditionally tougher than infantry. That's like the thing they do, right? So it's kind of odd that Death Guard has to take their infantry and specifically Mephitic Blight Hauler to get transhuman. So on to the fixed part for Death Guard. I think, like I've already said, if you drop this not embarked within a transport part, have let them have fun on that one. They would appreciate this detachment a bit more. And like they're realizing how good Vermin Cloud is. That's pretty cool. But yeah, make this Death Guard vehicle. I think that would be the one. And honestly, maybe make that a 4. Maybe make that a 4. So there's a little bit more play on the Mortal Wounds front of Death Guard combined with their characters that can put that out. And I'm not sure how many non-characters can put out Mortal Wounds, now that I think about it. But you already have stuff, the Biologics Putrefier, Free Grenades. You have the Chaos Lords doing Mortal Wounds. And again, those are all infantry. If you give Death Guard the fact, or excuse me, the ability to kind of quadruple down on the incoming damage, damaging zombie walker plague with poxwalkers and with their lethal hits and enough feel no pain and things like that, I think Death Guard might be happier with the detachment at that point. So that's my recommendation for Flyblown Host and why I think it seemed like it went so wrong compared to Star Shatter Arsenal. Somebody, and I know I've seen like a bajillion people talk about it now. It's like, huh, it's like there's a Necrons player on the balance team. And sure, I sure, but to that point, I think they need 30 players specialists on the team. And it just doesn't seem like they have that right now. So as mad as I want to be that Necron's got something that my favorite faction didn't get, I can respect it because it's what Necron's players should have and should want. You have two of the detachments that were duds in the codex, and two of them that were good. And index is index, so it's supposed to be passable, right? So 50-50, yeah, I'm not too upset that Star Shatter Arsenal came out. Death Guard, we don't know what your codex looks like, but I did also try to warn, and I will continue to warn, if you have a very good index right now, like a very good index detachment right now, it's not going to be outdone. Or I shouldn't say really good, a really flexible um index detachment. Take it from the Tyrannus player. I think Invasion Fleet's rules, Play Company's rules, Cult of Magic rules should be the army rule, not the fucking detachment for the index. It's too flexible to want to give up for the most part, and I mean specifically the detachment rule, of course, right? But you're telling me I have to give up picking from sustained hits, lethal hits, precision to a once per game battle shock test on all my opponents' models? It just doesn't, that doesn't equate, right? It doesn't feel good. Death Guard have to give up uh -1 save, -1 skill, or I'm blanking on the other one right now, but still have access to -1 toughness in the range? I don't know. That just seems so oddly out of place. So I'm hoping that they look back at these and do kind of what they're doing for Eldari, where instead of, because it's too powerful to put it on every detachment, you realize that all the other detachments would much rather benefit from the index than their own army rule, right? So for those of you that might not have kept up with all the news, last I checked, they said that the current Eldari rules for like Fate dice and shit is only going to one detachment. Compare it, and then they're going to get battle focus back or something along those lines. So we'll see. But back to the current detachments at hand. Flyblown host suggestions down. I also should note that I'm doing this after or before the Death Watch detachment comes back, index comes back, because it feels like this is a good moment to break and review the first weeks of new detachments coming back. Like we've seen Death Watch before, and that's like a new army more so than a detachment. So just wanted to focus on detachments. Lions Blade Task Force, I will say, this came from somebody that kind of knows what they're doing, um, or that department, because people are slowly, Dark Angel players I see are slowly warming up to this more and more. After the first 1 or 2 hours of Temper Tantrum, everybody's realizing shit like Inescapable Wrath is pretty nice. Strength and Unity is nice. Have that for one unit, Armor of Contempt for another. Overpowering Exaction isn't quite what some people would want, but it's also not the worst. Knights of Iron is nice, right? And Illuminated Fire also is, more and more people are talking about combinations for that as well. So Lions Blade Task Force, the only thing that I could really go and say is I'm confused why this is exactly like why a desperate escape test. I don't I don't really know why it isn't just like a chance to, if they were going to go with the battle shock route, a chance to battle shock or something like that. I really can't understand it. But I think more so everybody's wondering how the lion doesn't necessarily have play in his own task force, right? Like there's the ability to select them with overpowering exaction, but outside of that, don't really have much. I mean, you always get Armor of Contempt, right? It's it's odd, and I hope that they in the upcoming balanced data slate, and that's the other thing with all of this, that I hope that we're all speaking from a perspective of the balanced data slate will change things. If you release that balanced data slate and it's just like, oh, Biologics Putrefier down 5 points, and like call it a day, that's when people are going to be even more upset. So I really hope there's actual genuine changes in that thing. So for this, I don't know. I just feel like the Lion should probably get his keyword somehow, some way. Like, if not necessarily just straight on the keyword, I don't understand it. I don't know the lore enough, but from what I understand, he's not technically a Deathwing, and he's not a Ravenwing. But it would be nice that if you did the detachment rules, like while in this detachment, the Lion counts as both. Like it's just kind of weird that he doesn't necessarily see play amongst his own army faction because he doesn't necessarily have things to benefit from it exactly, right? So I think Dark Angel players would benefit from that a little bit more and would like this even more. But I did have one wacky tobacco idea, and I'm of the opinion that if you give everybody something busted, kind of nothing's busted, because everybody gets a chance to do something fun. And don't get me wrong, this is busted, but I think there's a way to go further beyond this a little bit, and that you reduce the CP cost if a Raven Wing unit is already engaged. I think that would be cool. To really highlight the combination of teamwork there. So that's my pitch for Alliance Blade Task Force. Then going to Warrior Bioform Onslaught. And the reason that as a Tyrannus player this upsets me, I already kind of saw that Kronos wasn't going to happen. I looked over the data sheets and I was just like, I don't see them giving us a detachment so that I can run more Exocrines, Maliceptors, Tyrannifex, Barbcons, Zoes. Like that's not the one. But this really needs ranged warriors to get a buff to feel better, first off. And I have a video recorded. I probably am putting this out first about the problem with melee warriors as well. But TLDR, they're not point sufficient. They're not. Everybody keeps going, but they kill so much, but they don't. And here's problem number one, and it's highlighted here, which makes me upset because it's clear that they're not going to get their data sheet fixed outside of this detachment. You compare them with other things, and other things get to survive a bit more to live on to another fight. You're telling me that my entire detachment rule is giving warriors a 5 up invulnerable save? That doesn't seem quite right. Oh, and their battle line? But under what circumstance am I going to realistically do that? Right? Like, I do have that whole, okay, maybe you just try to run it the way that GW tells you, right? It's like clearly they want you to bring 72 warriors and a bunch of battle line and be the hardest stat check army option, kind of. But we have Crusher Stampede, we have Unending Swarm before that keeps getting killed. Like every time they just kick it down a little bit more. So it's like, no, we have our ways of stat checks. We have pretty much the two main ones, either a bunch of big things or a bunch of little things. I don't need a bunch of middling things as a stat check. I don't. So if I were to change this and rewrite this, there's several issues. At the moment, the Wing Tyranid Prime is not battle line, and it doesn't have the keyword of Tyranid Warrior at the moment. So you need to fix that so I can have a leader for all of my units? Possible? And even then, technically, I still won't have that option. Because that would cap me out at 6 Wing Tyranid Primes, and I could have up to 12 Tyranid warrior units. So that's problem number one of I don't think this was that thought out. So there's that issue. Problem number two is that for 10 points, I get one more leader. This should say Neurotyrant model only if you want. During the declare battle formation step, Neurotyrant models can be attached to Tyranid warrior units. Plural. Right? I should be able to attach more than one Neurotyrant to Tyranid warriors. And and I was along the lines of making this one of those special interactions in which you can combine leaders onto a bodyguard squad, and then I would be okay with this detachment existing even further. If you go Neurotyrants can attach to Tyranid warrior units, regardless of if a leader is attached to the unit, that would be awesome. Wing Tyranid Prime, Neurotyrant, Tyranid warriors. I would 100% be more willing to pay 105 plus 65 for 6 models than I am to pick 3 of those units for 65 and then a fourth for 105. Because then that's +1 to hit, sustained hits, possibly +1 to wound, and now I feel better about my Tyranid warriors. That would be amazing. Then the detachment rule is lacking. This should be, if you wanted to make it seem like we have to work together with Endless Multitude, this needs to be a little bit more like Challenge of the Emperor or Lion's Blade Task Force. My rule shouldn't be that they get a 5-up invulnerable save. That should be their data sheet at best. I go more into it in depth in the video at either an earlier or later date, whenever that gets released. But comparatively, everybody else, this is their data sheet, right? Tyranid Warriors should have a 5-up invuln. Brewlord Gene Stealers have a 5-up invuln. It makes no sense that my save of a 4-up unit gets a invuln for stopping at one more. Like, if you're not going to make it a 4-up invuln, why are you doing this? Almost any amount of AP puts them on their invuln and takes them out. It is hard to roll 5-ups. Ask GSC players. You're asking me to roll a 5 or a 6 to keep my unit alive, and it's only T5. So make the 5-up the stat sheet, and then make this something along the lines of when Tyranid warriors are within, I don't know, 6 inches of Endless Multitude units, they gain +1 to hit, and or lethal hits or something because you already get sustained and you can get +1 with the Neurotyrant or an ocular adaptation. Something like they are maybe dev wounds, something, something along the lines of when they're nearby. And Endless Multitude units in turn become +1 to hit because you're doing the whole leader beast thing. You're trying to make it so that they are benefiting from heightened senses, hardened forms, and great strength. They serve as ferocious beacons for and enforcers of the hive mind's indomitable will. Give me a reason to play this and not Synaptic Nexus is what I'm asking, right? I can get a 5-up invulnerable save for my warriors in Synaptic Nexus. I can make them +1 to hit in Synaptic Nexus. I can make them -1 AP in Synaptic Nexus. I can do a lot of things with them in Synaptic Nexus. I can get more benefits for them attacking and drop a Wing Tyranid Prime altogether in Invasion Fleet. Crits on 5s, fight on death, 5-up field no pain, sustained without a Wing Tyranid Prime. They're better in other places. And then if you fix the ranged warrior, make it so that it's better here than Vanguard Onslaught. And I've been looking, it might still be better in Synaptic Nexus as well, under some circumstances. So they need to go back and look at this one into why I'm bringing more battle line. Maybe +1 toughness to warriors when within 6 inches of endless multitude. That would be nice. And +1 to hit for the endless multitude when within 6 inches of the Tyranid warriors. That would be cool. But the 5-up info needs to be on their data sheet. Let the Neurotyrant, plural, attach to multiple units of Winged Tyranid Primes and probably put them together. And make the Winged Tyranid Prime have the Tyranid Warrior keyword. So yeah, that would be how I would go about fixing Warrior Bioform Onslaught. Oh, and also, before I forget the strats, this drop the Endless Multitude part on this and this. Like this is again, I can't understand how you put this here, right? You said that my T5 4-up save, 5-up invulnerable now, 3 wound model needs at least 45 points and a CP to have transhuman compared to a vehicle just getting it. So that's where it's, yeah, I'm a big fan of internal balance and looking as to like, why am I bringing so many exocrines versus anything else? Yeah, nothing else has like above damage 1. Like most of my army does damage 1. And then you see anything that does a little bit more than damage 1, and that's why it's in the list. Maybe you increase the damage in this detachment. Maybe they gain +1 damage characteristic, maybe +1 attacks. +1 to the attack characteristic when within 6 inches of Endless Multitude. That could work as well. It just needs to give me a reason that's different in here than any other detachment to play the Tyranid Warriors. And then I'll go buy them. But as it stands, I have no reason to buy a battle line amount of warriors. So before I harp more on about my favorite faction, let's go over to Hexwarp Thrallband. And honestly, I looked at it and I realized really quickly what would be the best fix for this. Weapons inside of the flow of magic become psychic. Add that on. And it's an auto slam. It does then compete with Cult of Magic without needing to nerf Thousand Suns is tough. I know that change is probably already in the works, or at least we all think it is. But at the same time, we didn't expect them to write something for one army that's good for them and not everybody else. So, GW, if you're watching this, make it so that if such a model is wholly within your army's flow of magic, each time it makes an attack, it becomes a psychic attack, and psychic attacks add 1 to the wound roll. Instead, you can probably keep this at that point then, maybe, but at the same time, you have to write it so that I don't want to take Magnus. So I think you drop the instead too. Would that have to be adjusted later as well? Yes, but then it's on comparable playing field as Cult of Magic, and then you can really figure out what data sheets need to be adjusted instead of, well, we have to adjust for these data sheets in Cult of Magic. Because until their codex comes out, you are going to be looking at this and figuring out how to still adjust for Cult of Magic because people are going to play this. You're asking Thousand Suns players to do something that they don't traditionally do, which is hold primary. And to hold primary, you need bodies for that, and they don't bring a lot of that. They do the tactic of blasting away the other bodies to hopefully score some primary and go about it that way. So, in the flow of magic, all of your attacks need to become psychic attacks to get +1 wound, and let them keep the reroll wounds rolls of 1. Or maybe because you do have access to Araman and you do have access to Magnus, maybe you just drop all of this part and just do keep within the flow of magic all attacks become psychic attacks. That way, psychic attacks before the flow of magic get reroll wound rolls of 1. And then once you do have your flow of magic going, almost all of your attacks get reroll wound rolls of 1. But you have to work for it by maintaining your flow of magic. I think that's a fair trade-off. Going down, this was pretty nice overall. It's pretty odd that you gave them a fight on death, but if anything, maybe this is where you switch a little bit of things. Maybe Death Guard gets the fight on death here, right? And you give Thousand Suns the ability to make their weapons pistol. I know that you tried to do this thing of what they cover, cover their asses per se, right? Whereas it's like, okay, well, they need to fight a little bit harder, so let's give them pistol over here. And, well, they typically don't like combat, so what happens when they get in combat? They still have to worry about somebody fighting on death here. Maybe you switch these. Maybe you play further into the strengths at that point. Because -1 toughness and then a fight on death goes a little bit better. And then over here, reroll wound rolls on psychic attacks, and those psychic attacks are, for the most part, on the weapons of characters, the ranged weapons of characters. Now, all the warp smites are, but, this whatever, and let that become pistol. But again, you need to be in your flow of magic, and on this one, you need to be Death Guard infantry. So, I think that's a fair trade-off, and how I would then adjust Hex Warp Thrall Band. And then we have Halo's Creed Battleclade. This one, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit mad at myself for being convinced it was better than I first thought it was on first impression, and that's not to say it's bad. But when I looked at it, I went, "Oh yeah, this is good, but it's still AdMech." And you're giving up a detachment rule that covers most of your army for stat buffs on AdMech datasheets for 2/3 units. I I guess, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best one they've released so far. And that's how you get to the perception of they clearly wrote this one better than they wrote the ones before it. And then this one was written better than the ones before that. So there was definitely a scale of what happened here. And that's not to say that Halo's Creed is bad, but it doesn't cover enough. So I suggest one of two things, if not both. First, this needs to go up. I shouldn't be playing a 1,000 point game and only one of my units gets a detachment rule. Make that 2, make this 3, make that 4. Easy. The other thing is that I think this needs to go the Soulforge Warpack route, where Neural Overlord, no, Neural Overload, excuse me, does give them the keyword. I think they do just get the keyword. Now, if they already have it, still do the D3 Mortals. Don't worry about, double keyword or whatever, right? But if your unit does not have it, and instead gains the keyword for the rest of the battle for 1 CP. Soulforge Warpack, you are allowed to turn one vehicle a turn for 1 CP into a demon vehicle and get the benefits of the detachment. It's not too busted, and again, we're talking about AdMech datasheets. And what these datasheets are getting. +2 to move isn't the most busted thing. +1 to toughness, not too busted either. If I spend 1 CP to get +1 toughness for the rest of the game, that's not too egregious. Advance and charge usually sounds insane, but this is AdMech again. So the things that do want advance and charge have it, which is I forget which dragoons, I believe the Taser Lance ones. Or stealth, and you gave them an entire detachment to give them stealth and the benefit of cover. So it's not like it's exactly breaking the bank. And to this point, because I did forget this, I see what happened here on the 30-point enhancements. If you can get some other detachment's entire rule, they made the enhancement 30 points. It makes sense here because this does invalidate cohort cybernetica unless you really, really want to play with vehicles beyond 2 units per se. But this one does invalidate it because I also don't know why a detachment was written to give 1 unit, after the changes. On top of that, 1 unit the army rule. That makes no sense. But going to Tyranids, it shouldn't cost me 30 points to advance and charge any of the Tyranids characters at character units right now. Now, I have a theory at one that if the change does happen, this would make more sense, but this needs to be the 15 pointer as it currently stands. Right now, I have no reason to not just play Vanguard Onslaught, and give all of them advance and charge. Now, I do still hold the opinion that you shouldn't be throwing a bunch of Tyranid Warriors in Vanguard Onslaught. It doesn't work out nearly as great, but that's because of what their data sheet is, and this isn't about them right now or their coverage here, and it's going back to AdMech. Yeah, to make this even better. And it's not to say that it's bad. I think the mark was hit on the head, but I will say this targeting override also is strange to me. Crits on 5s is always good. Like I have a crit on 5 in Invasion Fleet, but it's only good if it's on the data sheet that they get a benefit from critical hits. So, why weren't any of the Halo override abilities something along the lines like they gain sustained hits, they gain lethal hits? Like, I think you make 2 more and put that there. Unit gain lethal hits, unit gain sustained hits. And I know that kind of goes against the Manipulus. I always confuse Manipulus and Dominus, but I'm pretty sure the Manipulus is lethal hits. And I know quite a few things have sustained hits. But if we're going to be overriding and turbocharging these units, let them have that fun. That's 2 units that then gets maybe sustains lethal. And I have to deal with them. And then you still have the ability to make another one in case they get popped immediately. So it works on both fronts. It's not too egregious. Yeah, make it 3, possibly 4 units that then get that. But I'm then putting sustained hits on Castellan robots instead of an advance and charge per se, or +1 toughness. Maybe I do then spend a CP to give them the sustained or lethals, but I think that's much better design for what AdMech do. They don't hit the hardest in melee, and their shooting is kind of a volume of attacks kind of situation, more so than just straight up deletion on the first go around. Don't get me wrong, they have some pretty good lasers, but as it currently stands, if you gave those lethals, nothing would really happen because they were already doing the wounds, and a few of them already have something like sustained D3 or something. So I think you expand this out to sustained or lethals, and you go, well, how would that just not be invalidating their entire codex? Because you're applying that to 3, 4 units if with the changes. If not, maybe you still keep the 2 /3 units, and Rad Zone Core can give whatever unit it wants per turn lethal hits. Um, you get +1 AP within half range, or +1 to strength and attacks, and Data Home Conclave. Explore the mana pool is reroll wounds or +1 to wound. I forget right now. Something with wounds. So it's like you got to give something a little bit more for AdMech data sheets to make me feel like this is going to just blow the house down. And it doesn't have to blow the house down, but I think that there's just more of a reason to do that. Now, I do also want to add, I say a lot of this from an outsider perspective. I don't play AdMech. Will say that I think they're the Imperium army I think I know the most about at this point because how many times I'm looking at them like you all can play other things. Um, and thanks Richard Siegler for proving me right on that one with the Onager Crawler and the Disintegrator. But I think that's one on that one. Then I go over to Hexwarp Thrall Band. I at the Chaos Legions. This is not this is not my realm. Same with Death Guard. I am a Tyranids player, so I'm more inclined to that one. But out of the regular Marines, or the Loyalist Marines, I should say, Dark Angels are my favorite. I still gotta learn more about them, but they are my favorite there. So it's just a coinky dink that this is the batch of things that I think I have enough. I shouldn't say enough. An okay understanding of them to see what went wrong and how they could be better, and why this stands out so much. Because this stands out because it clearly knew what needed to happen for the individual or for the army per se. That's why it stands out. The other ones feel like they missed the mark because somebody else took the reins and was like, all right, what are we going to do? How are we going to sell more warriors? Everybody played Space Marines too. They saw warriors. What are we going to do when they find out that they are not good in the game? What are we going to do? Uh, Make a detachment around them. Okay, what does a detachment do? 5 up invulnerable. What? 5 up invulnerable. And, like, OC3. That'll fix it. Like, no, it doesn't. And I'm assuming that the balanced data slate once more has more changes. But outside of that, it just seems very weird to do that. So, also, another big change while I'm here that probably will coincide with that is our only transport that is not Forge World is the Tyrannocyte for 105 points. If you can change it so that I can take an entire infantry unit into the egg for cheaper, drop that down to like 85 points or something like that, then this also becomes better as well. But as it currently stands, I am once again better off putting that in Invasion Fleet. And it's not to say that you alluded to ties or the Tyrannocyte here, but I can't fit 6 warriors and a leader in a Tyrannocyte for some odd reason and drop that somewhere to then start having fun. Because the other problem with the Warriors, compared to other detachments that have similar stat lines of the sheet, even though their saves are better, is that I have to walk there. I have to walk there. That means you are open to fire, Overwatch, fire, Overwatch. Didn't mean to do that, but we take it. Um, and getting punched on the way to your target. Heroic intervened as soon as you do try to charge something. So, that's problem other there. But I'm gonna stop talking about my favorite. We've gone through all of them. That's my week one of how I would fix these per se. And like again, I don't think this needs too much of a nerf. If I would have to think of the immediate fix that would make people happy, it would be remove assault or remove +1 hit, one or the other. But I don't think you need to do that. I do think in hindsight that this is just the fact that somebody understands Necrons enough to what would make them feel better and sell more models, right? But these other ones, some of them, they just don't feel too much better or sell more models. So, yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.